What if I told you that the most powerful weapon China has today is not its army, not its economy, not even its technology, but its memory? A memory of humiliation so deep that it still shapes how China sees the world, how it treats the West, and how it plans its future. Now wait, this video is not about propaganda. It is not about saying China is right or the West is wrong. In this video, we are going to understand one simple but uncomfortable question. Why does China fundamentally not trust the West? Why does every trade war, tech ban, military tension, and diplomatic clash feel inevitable? And why, when Western leaders talk about a rules-based international order, China hears something completely different? To understand modern China, we need to go back more than 180 years to a time when China was not weak at all. In the early 1800s, China was one of the richest and most advanced civilizations on Earth. According to economic historians like Angus Maddison, China alone contributed close to 30% of global GDP. Europe was obsessed with Chinese goods, tea, silk, porcelain. These were luxury items that Europeans could not live without. But here was the problem for Britain. China did not want European products. They demanded payment in silver, and Britain's silver reserves were running dry. This created a massive trade imbalance. So instead of fixing the problem honestly, the British Empire chose a shortcut. They began exporting opium grown in British-controlled India into China. This was not illegal street crime. This was industrial-scale, state-backed drug trafficking. Millions of Chinese became addicted. Productivity collapsed, families were destroyed, entire communities were affected. The Qing government tried to stop this disaster. In 1839, a senior official named Lin Zexu confiscated and destroyed more than 1,000 tons of opium. Any sovereign country would do the same. Britain's response was not diplomacy, it was war. Yes, Britain went to war because China refused to allow drugs to be sold to its people. This became the First Opium War. China lost badly, not because it lacked civilization or intelligence, but because it lacked modern weapons. The result was the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842, the first of what later became known as the Unequal Treaties. Hong Kong was handed over to Britain. Chinese ports were forcibly opened. Foreigners gained extraterritorial rights, meaning they were not subject to Chinese law even on Chinese soil. This was a direct attack on China's sovereignty. Once China was shown to be weak, other Western powers rushed in. France, Germany, Russia, Japan, and even the United States demanded their share. The Second Opium War made things even worse. British and French forces marched into Beijing and burned the old Summer Palace, a cultural treasure that took over 150 years to build. Historians agree there was no military necessity. It was done to humiliate, to send a message. By the late 1800s, China had been carved into spheres of influence. Railways, ports, and entire regions were controlled by foreigners. Chinese citizens were treated as second-class people in their own country. Imagine for centuries believing you are the center of civilization, only to become a playground for foreign empires within a few decades. In 1900, Chinese civilians finally fought back in what became known as the Boxer Rebellion. They targeted foreign control and missionary influence. The response was overwhelming. 8 nations formed an alliance and invaded China. After crushing the rebellion, they forced China to pay 450 million taels of silver as punishment. Adjusted for inflation, this equals billions of dollars today. China had to compensate foreign powers for resisting exploitation. This entire period, from 1839 to 1949, is officially called in China the Century of Humiliation. And this is extremely important. This is not forgotten history. This is taught in schools. It is shown in movies, TV shows, museums, and national memorials. The National Museum of China has a permanent exhibition dedicated to this era. When Chinese leaders talk about national rejuvenation or the Chinese dream, they are referring directly to this trauma. In 1949, when Mao Zedong stood in Tiananmen Square and declared that the Chinese people had stood up, it symbolized the end of foreign domination. But China's struggle did not end there. During the Cold War, China was isolated by Western powers. Trade embargoes were imposed. China was excluded from the United Nations for over 20 years. Taiwan held China's seat instead. US-led military alliances surrounded China's borders. Then came the Korean War. Chinese and American soldiers fought directly. From China's perspective, US troops were operating right on their border, threatening national security. This reinforced a deep sense of fear and mistrust. Even when China opened its economy in the late 1970s, trust never truly formed. China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, believing it was finally being accepted into the global system. Western companies rushed in to benefit from cheap labor and massive manufacturing capacity. But when China began developing its own technology, companies like Huawei, ZTE, and later TikTok, the narrative changed. Suddenly, China was labeled a national security threat. Sanctions, bans, and export controls followed. From China's point of view, the rules were fair only when China was weak. Look at the South China Sea. The United States maintains hundreds of military bases around the world, many of them close to China. American aircraft carriers regularly patrol waters near Chinese territory. Imagine Chinese warships operating near the coast of California or Florida. Would the US accept that? From China's perspective, this is not defense. This is containment. Then there was 1999. During NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia, American bombs hit the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. 3 Chinese journalists were killed. The official explanation was outdated maps. Whether accidental or not, the lesson China absorbed was simple. International law applies selectively. Sovereignty matters only when powerful countries decide it does. Today, China is the world's second largest economy, possibly soon the first. It has advanced technology, a powerful military, and global influence through trade and infrastructure. But China does not see the world through Western eyes. It sees a system built when China was weak. This does not mean China is always right. It does not mean criticism of China has no merit. But China's behavior only makes sense when viewed through this historical trauma. China does not want revenge. It wants control. Control over its destiny, its security, and its future. The century of humiliation officially ended in 1949, but its shadow stretches deep into the 21st century. China remembers. And that memory has become policy. So here is the real question. Can a global system created by the West adapt to a China that refuses to forget its past? Or are we heading toward a future where history itself becomes the fault line of the next great global conflict? I want to know what you think. Share your perspective in the comments. And if you want more videos that explain the hidden history behind today's global headlines, you know what to do.